Okay, so today we are hosting a diplomacy dialogue on the post-BRICS outcomes and implications for development cooperation. And today we are hosting Professor Chris Landsberg from the University of Johannesburg. So the first question that we would like to pose to you today is on the question of BRICS and what is their possible development position.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two lingering questions as pertains development cooperation. The one is, will the BRICS countries themselves develop their own paradigm or model of development? Would they make funds available to developing countries? They themselves, ironically, are in need of development aid. There seems to be talk to go in that direction. But then there's, of course, the other more important question, and that is, how do they see the future of development aid themselves? I mean, we've just had this incident where Britain decided to cut development aid to South Africa. There's this assumption that these countries don't need aid, yet they do. And may I just add to that, how are they going to cooperate with one another in order to almost augment or strengthen development cooperation? I think they're pretty weak on that score. I don't think they cooperate with each other as well as they should in terms of development cooperation, coordinating efforts and so on. So it's pretty unclear, but there is no doubt that all four of them are increasingly going to support development programs, particularly in the area of infrastructure development. There's something to be had for them after all in terms of infrastructure development. It's not as if they, giving largesse for free. They clearly prefer a stable Africa, an Africa that can stand on its feet as far as infrastructure is concerned. So there is a self-interest dimension to this. Where I am very skeptical is the ability of these four to coordinate and to cooperate in the areas of joint development projects in other countries, let alone in one another's countries, because the institutional edifice, the institutional arrangements for such things, I think is going to take much more time to set up than people realize.
Building on that, could you expand a little bit perhaps on the idea of the BRICS Development Bank and what it means for Africa?
It's very interesting what's going on around the Development Bank. We know that in spite of statements to the contrary, or notwithstanding statements to the contrary, there is no agreement as to who should host the bank. We know that South Africa is regarded and sees itself as the front runner. Why are the other BRICS countries so reluctant to give it to South Africa? It's not because they don't think South Africa deserves it. They, quite frankly, are skeptical about South Africa's human resources and institutional capacity to make this thing work. The Chinese have the resources. They're ready to write out the checks tomorrow. And if you look at all their statements, from President Xi to all the other officials, they emphasize efficiency and effectiveness. They want an efficient and effective bank. That bank will primarily be a bank for African development, for Africa's infrastructure development. So why are they doing that? Again, it's not something noble. They have interest in Africa. Even the quiet BRICS member, the one that I believe has been the most sophisticated in terms of how it's conducted itself, didn't come across as arrogant, as boastful, as pushy. Brazil, they have interest in Africa. They have huge interest in Africa, and they would want that bank to help them to create the environment for them to tap into Africa's resources. But if you want to be noble and give them a bit of credit, they also want to be seen to be doing something for Africa beyond this idea that they're here to exploit. But primarily it will be a bank for Africa and for African development, because they are here to benefit from Africa's largely untapped resources. They all buy into this idea that Africa is the next frontier to be exploited. I think that's what this bank is here to do, is to create the opportunities for them to exploit this market as effectively and efficiently as possible. A bit of a contradiction in terms there, right? Exploit, but effectively and efficiently.
And finally, I know that it's the 10-year anniversary of IBSA, so I thought perhaps you could just share a bit with us on BRICS and IBSA and the possible futures.
You know, it's very interesting. Before South Africa joined BRICS in 2010, IBSA was dying a very slow death. Interest in IBSA was waning because people thought that BRICS would, of course, become the new game in town and render IBSA, for all intents and purposes, irrelevant. Ironically, BRICS has actually given IBSA a lifeline. And you ask yourself, now, how did this come about? It's precisely because one of the things we don't speak enough about are the differences between BRICS members. We treat them as this cohesive, unified bloc with a lot in common. There are lots of geostrategic differences between the 5 members, notably between the P2, the 2 members on the UN Security Council, and the other 3. It just so happened that the other 3 are countries with more solid democratic credentials, not so much China and Russia, but democracy should not be confused with stability. China appears to be, a stable place where you have a communist country, a party very much in control of that country. So BRICS has given IBSA a lifeline because I think the 3 non-permanent members of the Security Council within BRICS realize just how much they have in common, how much they can leverage support from one another, how easy it is for them to develop common positions on global political issues, on global financial issues, on transforming global financial institutions, on trilateral cooperation from education to health to agriculture, or all these sectors. So ironically, IBSA is going to survive because of BRICS, and also there will be a lot of cross-fertilization between what's going on in BRICS and what's going on in IBSA. So those of us who thought that BRICS would actually spell or signal the death knell of IBSA, I don't think it's true. And again, one final point, which again is a bit of a paradox, is that with the 3 IBSA members continuing to meet and continuing to bolster IBSA, they could ironically give BRICS a bit of a push. Because BRICS' weakness is that this thing started off and remains largely a loose association of states that were going to focus on strengthening economic cooperation with one another. All of a sudden now they have to confront the question about, do we need secretariats? What institutions do we put in place for BRICS to coordinate, to marshal our efforts? IBSA already has that. IBSA has come a long way since 2003. There's going to be a lot of duplication and overlap, even a lot of waste, but I don't think IBSA is about to die. BRICS has actually rescued IBSA.